Thank you for coming to our virtual talk today. Our talk is entitled The Archaeology of Children on Michigan State University's Campus. We represent Michigan State University's Campus Archaeology Program, also known as CAP. CAP was established in 2005 by Professor Emeritus Dr. Lynn Goldstein, who retired in 2018. The MSU Campus Archaeology Program is funded via a permanent line item in the university's general budget and through the MSU Graduate School. Our mission is to protect and mitigate archaeological resources on MSU's campus and to publicly disseminate our findings. I took over directorship in 2018. My name is Stacy Camp. Autumn Painter was the MSU campus archaeologist from 2018 to 2020, and Jeff Burnett took over as the campus archaeologist from Autumn in the summer of 2020. Our talk today will explore the history of children on Michigan State University's campus through the lens of archaeological and archival data. We will focus on 3 areas of campus that feature archival and archaeological evidence of children at MSU. The first is Saints Rest, which dates from 1857 to 1876. Saints Rest was the first dormitory on MSU's campus. The second site is known as Faculty Row, which dates from 1857 to the 1910s. Faculty Row was the first housing established for faculty at MSU. Lastly, we will look at the expansion of MSU's campus due to the GI Bill, which included welcoming numerous families and housing them on campus from 1945 to 1959.
The presence of children on campus can be examined by mapping spaces historically associated with families or child-related educational activities from 1857 to around 1960. We define child-related spaces as those where children would have resided and or attended school as campus existed for them. Thus, we excluded children who may have visited the school and excluded indigenous and settler children who lived in areas that were later acquired by MSU. This first map is an overview of all child-related areas on campus. Blue represents the oldest areas, and over time, child-related areas shift southward, further and further away from the center of campus. At MSU today, the symbolic center of campus is a green area known as the Sacred Space that in the earliest days served as the school's academic and social core. This shifting represents the separation of families and academic life beginning in the early 20th century. 2 major trends are visible at MSU. The first occurring from around the mid-1910s, when affluent faculty and their families moved off campus and helped establish the city of East Lansing. The second occurred in the mid-1940s, when the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, the GI Bill, opened college education to large numbers of white veterans who came to college with their families. The major trends were further broken down into 4 phases of child-related spaces at MSU. Each will be presented as its own map. The first phase dates from 1857 to around 1920 and describes when the children living at the college were either the children of faculty who resided in a neighborhood of single-family homes, dubbed Faculty Row, or the children of staff living in dormitories. During this period, the college was small, and these residential spaces served the social needs of students, staff, and faculty. Children may not have been the center of attention, but they resided at the center of college life. Starting in the mid-1910s, faculty began to move off campus, and by the mid-1920s, many of the faculty row houses were used by the Home Economics Department. In 1927, a nursery was opened to the east of Faculty Row on the 3rd floor of the new Home Economics building. This change meant while child-related spaces became officially recognized, their extent shrunk considerably. This would change by the mid-20th century as the enrollment of married veterans greatly increased the number of children living on campus and the places those children likely had access to. This map shows the extent of those changes and the shift of families and children away from the center of campus. There was little spatial distinction between the residences of married faculty and students. Haphazard and tightly packed, this area may have served as a wonderful, if short-lived, social space for young children, a micro-town within the college bounds, complete with its own shop, nursery school, and social spaces. By 1960, MSU had constructed permanent housing for married students, replacing the array of temporary housing. While faculty housing stayed in the same location, married student housing was split between 3 apartment complexes, the largest of which was called Spartan Village. These locations continued the trend of removing families and children from the central spaces of college life. Built in 1857 and burned down in 1876, Saints Rest was an all-male dormitory for the entirety of its existence. Thus, not the first site that comes to mind for a study of child-related space on campus, but historical and artifactual evidence indicates that they may have just been. Historical records and secondary sources show that, in addition to male college students, from 1857 until 1870, the college's steward and farm manager and their families lived in Saints Rest dormitory. Thus, Saints Rest serves as another reminder that archaeologists must be ever wary of gendering sites in ways that elide other aspects of their history. The dorm was 4 stories tall and divided into sleeping rooms, a kitchen, a parlor, laundry room, dining room, and an apartment for the steward and his family. The steward and his family remained in the dorm even when the college closed for winter break. A survey of Board of Trustee records shows that in at least 1863, the farm manager and his family also resided in Saints Rest. With the construction of a second dorm, Williams Hall, in 1870, the kitchens and steward's apartments were shifted to this new building. And in 1883, professional stewards were replaced with student employees. The presence of staff and their families, as the only full-time residents of Saints Rest and the only residents likely to have children, asks us to reconsider the population of dormitories on campus prior to 1883. While Saints Rest was undoubtedly a male-dominated space and was designed for these young men, it was also a place where families lived and where children may have grown up. Saints Rest was originally excavated in 2005 during the first Department of Anthropology field school on campus. While excavations identified the foundations of the structure and recovered many structural artifacts, it provided few insights into students' daily lives. In 2015, a brick privy associated with Saints Rest was discovered by MSU campus archaeologists. Diagnostic artifacts date the privy to between 1850s and 1860s. These data indicate that the artifacts were deposited and the context closed prior to the removal of dining, social spaces, and staff apartments. Artifacts recovered from the privy include 2 porcelain dolls, a frozen Charlotte figurine, and a complete but fragmented doll bust. Frozen Charlotte figurines were sold as cheap toys to American consumers during the mid-19th century and were often baked into cakes as surprises for children. These minimally decorated figurines were linked to a Victorian poem where a disobedient girl, Charlotte, froze to death for failing to bundle up on a cold night. The bust, on the other hand, is highly decorated. These 3 holes would have articulated to a cloth body complete with porcelain hands and feet. Despite the lack of a maker's mark, campus archaeologists dated the doll to the early to mid-1860s based on the doll's flat-top hairstyle. Both artifacts indicate the presence of children in and around Saints Rest. The date of the bust in the privy context suggests that the doll is unlikely to have been a cherished childhood object for a male student residing in the dorm. While the doll may have belonged to a resident of Faculty Row, considering the privy's distance from that neighborhood and proximity to Saints Rest, it seems more likely that the doll belonged to a family member of one of the stewards or farm managers who lived in the dormitory. The multiple connection between frozen Charlotte figurines and young girls during the mid-19th century indicates that this artifact was unlikely to have been used by male students of the dorm.
Buildings on Faculty Row were occupied beginning in 1857 through the 1910s. After faculty moved out of the homes in the early 1900s, many of the homes were repurposed for teaching. In total, 10 homes and 1 apartment building were constructed. The first 4 buildings were constructed in 1857, and only 1 building is still standing on campus today, the University President's House. As both faculty members and their families resided in these homes, Faculty Row became, as Kuhn describes it, a place of children. Most families who lived on Faculty Row had at least 1 child, and faculty recognized that it was an ideal place in which to rear a family. Notable families that had children while living in Faculty Row include the Abbotts, Kedseys, Cooks, Carpenters, Beals, and Fairchilds. Kuhn also notes that the faculty and staff often joined the children in play and invited them into laboratories and other campus spaces. In later decades, many of the first female students to join the university came from Faculty Row, themselves the grown-up daughters of faculty and staff. On the slide, you can read 2 reflections by children who grew up on Faculty Row, David Fairchild and Dorothy Petite Reed. From these, we learn that the children who grew up on Faculty Row enjoyed interacting with the neighborhood faculty and their families and viewed them as their extended family, as well as enjoying exploring the campus itself. From these quotes, we can begin to imagine the life of children growing up on the early college campus. Unfortunately, no childhood-related artifacts have been uncovered during any excavations in this area.
MSU expanded exponentially as World War II ended. The university anticipated an unprecedented growth in its student body due to the GI Bill of Rights that guaranteed veterans the right to a college education. MSU's enrollment doubled between 1946 and 1949, going from 8,000 veterans in 1946 to 16,000 in 1949. MSU's rapidly rising enrollment numbers catapulted the university from 22nd place to 9th place in 1949 in terms of nationwide university enrollment numbers. MSU capitalized on this opportunity to educate veterans by being one of few universities to construct additional housing for veterans, including housing for married veterans. The university president at the time, President Hanna, foresaw the need and helped encourage the university's board to secure $6 million to support housing construction. The Quonset huts seen in this undated area were one of the university's solutions to housing veterans. These steel Quonset huts housed single men and families and were sourced from a variety of emergency war housing projects in various Michigan towns. In the summer of 2020, amid the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, the lives of these post-World War II families were unearthed during a construction project on what is currently known as Service Road. Construction work involved installing and extending utility lines. It took place from the beginning of June 2020 through the end of August 2020. A large, nearly football field-sized midden or trash deposit was encountered during the project that is in association with the post-World War II GI Bill housing on campus. Thousands of artifacts from this time period were recovered, including artifacts that captured the lives of children who were living on campus en masse for the first time in MSU's history. This doll was likely produced from 1940 to 1947 by the Irwin Corporation of New Hampshire. The company was in operation from 1922 to 1973. The doll was a baby doll made out of celluloid and featured a small squeaker at the base of the back of its head. Toys with squeakers were popular in the 1940s. Celluloid toys like this one were eventually found to be highly flammable, which resulted in a ban on them in 1947. Other plastic toys found include this plastic car, which a construction worker recovered for us while working on the project, and this plastic microscope. This plate dates from 1951 to 1968 and was manufactured by Arabia, a company that is still in existence today. Arabia is based in Helsinki, Finland, and began manufacturing ceramics in 1874. This ceramics pattern was known as zoo or parade and was a ceramic for children to use. This small, child-sized creamware creamer was made by Roseville Pottery Company. Roseville began producing ceramics in 1890 out of Roseville, Ohio, and it closed in 1954. This vessel was part of their ceramics line known as Juvenile. It was called that because these ceramics were designed to be used by children. They were produced from 1910 to the early 1920s. The line featured a variety of animals, including ducks, pigs, rabbits, dogs, chicks, and cats. While not directly related to children, this bear, which was part of a salt and pepper shaker set, evokes an image of parents encouraging their children to sit and eat at the dinner table by setting their table with this whimsical character. The patent for the set was obtained by its artist, Ruth Van Tellegen, in 1951. The set interlocks, meaning that the two bears fit together in a hug. The word Bendel was added to the maker's mark in 1958, which means that this bear predates 1958. This is a Pyrex Evenflow glass baby bottle that was used as early as 1927. The bottle was made of borosilicate glass, which Pyrex used from 1915 to 1988. The six-sided design was unique in that it prevented the baby bottle from rolling. Metric and imperial volume measurements are provided on opposite sides of the bottle, as the item was marketed and patented in both the United States and Canada. The rubber nipple that was used on this bottle was patented on September 14, 1937. We also found a rubber nipple in our assemblage, though it is not the same as the one used on this particular bottle. We also recovered a child's small, red nylon mitten with felted wool or synthetic insulation. Nylon was introduced in the 1940s. Other child-related artifacts found during this project include marbles, a small headless doll figurine with a pink dress, and small leather children's shoes. We are still working on cleaning, identifying, and cataloging the many artifacts recovered from this project, and we look forward to sharing more stories about this site in the coming years on our social media.